I'm standing on the stage of the Grand Metropolitan Ballroom, wearing a $15,000 Valentino gown, looking out at a sea of Manhattan's most powerful people. CEOs, senators, celebrities, all here for my foundation's inaugural gala. But my eyes are fixed on table 7, where my husband's family sits in stunned silence, reading the program that just revealed I'm donating $10 million to save their failing charity. The same family who told me 5 years ago that I'd never really be one of them. The same mother-in-law who said I was sweet but not quite their caliber. The same people who excluded me from family board meetings because these decisions require a certain understanding of their world. Well, I built my own world, and tonight they're guests in it. Comment below what city you're from. I want to see how far this story reaches. My name is Alina Martinez, and I used to believe that love could conquer anything. 5 years ago, I was a 28-year-old social worker earning $42,000 a year, living in a studio apartment in Queens, and genuinely believing I was making a difference helping immigrant families navigate the system. My own parents had come from El Salvador with nothing but hope and determination, working multiple jobs so I could be the first in our family to graduate college. I met Jonathan Harrington at a charity auction where I was volunteering. He was everything I'd never imagined for myself: tall, handsome, from a family whose name graced hospital wings and museum plaques. The Harringtons weren't just wealthy, they were New York royalty, old money, the kind of family where being worth only $50 million made you the poor relation. Jonathan was different from what I expected. He didn't look down on my work or my background. When I told him about my family's immigration story, he listened with genuine interest. When he picked me up for our first real date, he drove his practical car, a BMW instead of the Bentley, because he didn't want me to feel uncomfortable. Alina, he said after we'd been dating for 6 months, I need you to know something, my family. They can be challenging. They have certain expectations, certain ways of doing things, but I love you and that's all that matters. I should have paid more attention to that warning. We got engaged after a year. He proposed at the small community garden where I volunteered on weekends, not at some 5-star restaurant. It was perfect, intimate, just us. But when we went to tell his family, I got my first real taste of what challenging meant. Victoria Harrington, his mother, received the news with the kind of smile you give a child who's just shown you a drawing that's more enthusiasm than talent. How lovely, she said, her voice carrying all the warmth of a January morning. Jonathan, are you certain this is what you want? His father, Charles, was more direct. Son, marriage is a partnership in all things: financial compatibility, social expectations, family responsibilities. Have you considered whether Alina understands the complexities of our position? I felt Jonathan's hand tighten on mine. Alina is incredible, Dad. She's smart, caring, accomplished. Of course she is, Victoria interrupted smoothly. We're simply saying that joining a family like ours comes with certain considerations: social obligations, charitable commitments, business relationships that span generations. It's a world that takes time to understand. The message was clear: you don't belong here. But I was determined to prove them wrong. I threw myself into learning everything I could about their world. I studied art history, wine pairings, the social protocols of high society events. I volunteered countless hours for their family foundation, the Harrington Legacy Fund, which focused on education and healthcare initiatives. I attended their charity galas in borrowed dresses, smiling until my face hurt while Victoria introduced me as Jonathan's friend, even after we'd set a wedding date. I sat through dinner parties where conversations about yacht clubs and private schools made me feel like I needed a translator. I nodded politely when distant relatives would ask, "And what do your people do?" with barely concealed curiosity. The wedding planning was its own special kind of torture. Every suggestion I made was met with, "That's interesting, dear, but we've always done things this way." The venue, the flowers, the menu, the guest list, all decided by committee, with my voice counting for roughly nothing. What would you do in this situation? Let me know in the comments. The breaking point came 8 months after our wedding. I'd been working on a proposal for the Foundation's education initiative, spending weeks researching innovative programs for underserved communities. I'd found a model from San Antonio that was showing incredible results: a mentorship program pairing college students with middle schoolers that was dramatically improving graduation rates. I was excited. Finally, here was something I could contribute, a way to make a real difference with the foundation's resources. I put together a comprehensive presentation, complete with statistics, budget projections, and implementation timelines. The family board meeting was held in Charles's mahogany-paneled home office, with its oil paintings of long-dead Harringtons staring down from the walls. Victoria, Charles, Jonathan, and his sister Margaret were all there, along with their longtime family attorney and financial advisor. I'd practiced my presentation a dozen times. I knew every number, every statistic, every potential objection and response. When Charles nodded for me to begin, I felt a surge of confidence. The current education initiative is achieving solid results, I began, but I've identified an opportunity to triple our impact with the same budget allocation. This program in San Antonio has reduced dropout rates by 67% in participating schools over 3 years. I walked through the data, the testimonials from teachers and parents, the scalability potential. I could see the financial advisor taking notes, nodding thoughtfully. This was good work, and I knew it. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Then Victoria cleared her throat. Alina, dear, we appreciate your enthusiasm, but the board has already allocated funds for this year's educational programs. We're expanding the scholarship program at Jonathan's alma mater. But this would help so many more children, I pressed. The scholarship program helps maybe 50 students a year. This could impact thousands. Charles leaned back in his leather chair. Alina, you have to understand. The Harrington Legacy Fund has relationships with certain institutions that go back decades. Our scholarship program at Whitfield Academy isn't just about education, it's about maintaining connections, ensuring our family's continued influence in important circles. I understand that, I said, feeling heat rise in my cheeks but pushing forward anyway. But shouldn't the foundation's primary goal be maximum impact? If we can help more children with the same resources. The foundation's primary goal, Margaret interrupted coldly, is stewarding the Harrington family legacy. Some things are more complex than simple numbers, Alina. I looked at Jonathan, waiting for him to support me, to acknowledge that my proposal had merit. He was staring at his hands. Jonathan, I said quietly. He finally looked up, and I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach drop. Embarrassment. Not at his family's dismissal of my work, but at me. At my persistence, my inability to just accept their decision gracefully. Maybe we can table this for now, he said. Revisit it next year when you have a better understanding of how the foundation operates. The silence that followed felt like a physical weight. Victoria's smile was pitying. Charles had already moved on to other business. The financial advisor wouldn't meet my eyes. Of course, I said, my voice remarkably steady. I understand perfectly. But I didn't understand. Not their dismissal, not their priorities, and certainly not my husband's silence. What I understood with crystal clarity was that it didn't matter how hard I worked, how smart my ideas were, or how much good we could do. I would always be the outsider looking in, tolerated but never truly included. That night, Jonathan tried to smooth things over. Alina, you have to give them time. They're set in their ways, but they'll come around. Your passion for helping people is one of the things I love most about you. Then why didn't you support me in there? I asked. He sighed, because change takes time with my family. You can't just walk in and expect them to overhaul decades of tradition. There's a process, a way these things are done. A way that doesn't include me having a real voice. That's not fair, you're part of the family now. Am I? Because it doesn't feel that way. He looked genuinely confused, which somehow made it worse. He couldn't see what was so obvious to me, that his family had no intention of ever truly accepting me, and he was either unable or unwilling to change that. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. Jonathan, I want to start something of my own, a nonprofit focused on education and economic mobility for underserved communities. He frowned. Alina, you're already involved with the foundation. Isn't that enough? Apparently not. I want to create something where I can actually make decisions, where the focus is on impact, not maintaining social connections. I don't know, starting a nonprofit is incredibly demanding and expensive. And honestly, it might send the wrong message to my family, like you're rejecting their foundation. Maybe I am. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, just be careful, Alina, don't embarrass us. Don't embarrass us. Not I believe in you or how can I help, but don't embarrass us. That night, lying next to my husband who was already asleep, I stared at the ceiling of our Upper East Side apartment, paid for by his trust fund, and made a promise to myself. I wouldn't just start a nonprofit, I would build something extraordinary. Something that would prove, once and for all, that I wasn't the weak link in the Harrington family legacy. I was going to become the strongest link they'd ever seen. Starting Aurora Foundation, while maintaining my marriage and my day job, was like trying to run 3 different marathons simultaneously. I worked my social services job during the day, spent evenings and weekends building the foundation, and tried to show up as the supportive Harrington wife when required. The first test came when I needed seed funding. I'd saved $15,000 from my modest salary, but that wouldn't go far. I considered asking Jonathan for help, but his comment about not embarrassing them still stung. Instead, I reached out to Maria Santos, a social worker I'd mentored early in my career who'd since become a successful immigration lawyer. Alina, this is ambitious, Maria said, reviewing my business plan over coffee in Queens, a neighborhood that felt like home after months of Manhattan social events. But you have something most people don't when they start nonprofits. What's that? You actually know what you're talking about. You've worked in the field. You understand the problems firsthand, not just from charity galas and tax write-offs. Maria became my first board member and contributed $5,000. Through her network, I found others, a tech entrepreneur whose family had immigrated from Colombia, a teacher turned principal who'd grown up in foster care, a small business owner who'd started with food trucks and now owned 12 restaurants. These weren't names you'd recognize from society pages. They were people who'd built something from nothing, who understood that impact mattered more than prestige. The second test came 6 months in, when I had to miss Margaret's engagement party for a crucial meeting with potential corporate sponsors. Jonathan was furious. Alina, this is family. Margaret specifically asked you to help coordinate with the caterers. You can't just not show up. I sent detailed notes and confirmed everything twice. The event will run perfectly without me standing around making small talk about flower arrangements. That's not the point. The point is showing up for family when it matters. Like your family showed up for my ideas at the board meeting. We were fighting more often. Not screaming matches, but cold, careful disagreements that left us sleeping on opposite sides of our king-size bed. Jonathan couldn't understand why I was working so hard on my little charity when I could just focus more energy on the Harrington Foundation. I couldn't understand why he couldn't see that his family would never truly value my contributions there. The third test was professional. 18 months in, Aurora Foundation had grown faster than I'd projected. We'd launched our first mentorship program, secured partnerships with 3 school districts, and attracted attention from major donors. But with growth came scrutiny. A reporter from the New York Observer called asking about potential conflicts of interest between my foundation and the Harrington family's philanthropic work. Ms. Martinez Harrington, he said, some are questioning whether New York needs 2 education-focused foundations from the same family. Are you concerned about competing for donor dollars with your husband's family foundation? I chose my words carefully. Aurora Foundation focuses specifically on economic mobility and college access for first-generation students. We're filling a gap that larger foundations often miss. There's more than enough need to go around. But isn't it unusual for family members to operate separate charitable organizations? Some might see it as a sign of internal disagreement. I'd encourage people to look at our results rather than speculate about our motivations. In 2 years, we've helped 347 students secure college scholarships and provided financial literacy training to over 1,200 families. That's what matters. When the article ran, the headline was, Harrington in-law strikes out on her own, competition or compliment, Victoria called Jonathan immediately. "This is exactly what we were concerned about," I could hear her saying through the phone. "Alina's creating unnecessary controversy. People are talking." "What are they saying?" Jonathan asked wearily. "That there's discord in the family, that Alina felt unwelcome in our foundation, that she's trying to upstage us with flashier programs." I was listening from the kitchen, pretending to focus on making dinner, while my marriage dissolved in real time in the living room. "Alina," Jonathan called, "can you come in here?" I sat across from him, watching as he struggled to balance loyalty to his wife with a lifetime of deference to his family. "Maybe you could coordinate more with mom and dad," he said finally. "You know, make sure your programs complement theirs rather than compete." "Aurora Foundation has its own mission and its own board," I said quietly. "We're not a subsidiary of the Harrington Legacy Fund." "But you're a Harrington, your work reflects on all of us. Then maybe you should be proud of what I've accomplished instead of worried about how it looks." He was quiet for a long moment. "Are you happy, Alina? Really happy? Because this whole thing feels like you're trying to prove something instead of just living our life." It was the first time he'd asked about my happiness in months. But his concern wasn't for me, it was for the version of me that fit more comfortably into his family's expectations. "I'm happy when I'm making a real difference," I said. "I'm happy when I can use my skills and experience to actually help people. I'm happy when I'm not just a decoration at charity events." "You're not a decoration." "Aren't I? When's the last time anyone in your family asked for my opinion on something that actually mattered? When's the last time they treated me like I had something valuable to contribute?" He didn't have an answer for that. The fourth test came during our second annual board meeting. My original board had grown to include some impressive names: a former education secretary, a successful impact investor, a pediatric surgeon who ran free clinics. We were reviewing our expansion plans when my phone buzzed with a text from Jonathan. "Mom wants to know if you're free for lunch Thursday. She has an idea she wants to discuss with you." I should have been suspicious. Victoria had never once asked me to lunch. Thursday came, and we met at Le Bernardin, her choice, naturally. She was already seated when I arrived, immaculate in Chanel and pearls. "Alina dear, you look well. Is that a new bag?" It wasn't. It was the same Coach bag I'd owned for 3 years, but I knew Victoria noticed details like that. It was a power play, subtle but effective. "Thank you for inviting me," I said. "Jonathan mentioned you had an idea to discuss." Victoria smiled. "Actually, it's more of an opportunity. Charles and I have been watching Aurora Foundation's growth with great interest. You've done remarkable work." I waited. With Victoria, the important part always came after the compliment. "We've been thinking that it might be time to bring your innovative approaches to the Harrington Legacy Fund. We'd love to explore merging the two foundations. You'd lead the education initiative, of course, with full autonomy over programming decisions." My coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. Merge. Think about it, Alina. Combined resources, no competition for donors, unified family messaging. You'd have access to our donor network, our reputation, our endowment. Imagine what you could accomplish with that kind of backing. It was expertly done. She was offering me everything I'd claimed to want: resources, autonomy, respect, while simultaneously ensuring I'd never truly own my success. "That's a significant decision," I said carefully. "I'd need to discuss it with my board." Of course, though I imagine they'd see the wisdom in joining forces with an established institution rather than continuing to compete with it. There it was, the velvet threat: join us or remain competitors, and we both knew who had more resources for that competition. I spent the rest of lunch nodding politely, while Victoria outlined how the merger might work, all of it structured to preserve Harrington control while giving me the appearance of partnership. That night, I called Maria. "They want to absorb you," she said bluntly after I explained the offer. "Alina, you've built something incredible. Don't let them take credit for it." But she's right about the resources. We could help so many more people with their backing. At what cost? You'd be back where you started, working for their approval, operating under their constraints. The only difference is now you'd be helping them take credit for your innovations. I knew Maria was right, but I also knew the pressure I'd face at home if I declined. Jonathan would see it as another rejection of his family, another sign that I was prioritizing my ego over practical solutions. What would you do? Take the merger or keep fighting independently? Let me know in the comments. I stalled on Victoria's merger offer for 2 weeks, claiming I needed time to review the legal and financial details, but I was really buying time to figure out my next move. That's when I got the call that changed everything. Ms. Martinez Harrington? This is David Chen from the Brennan Foundation. We've been following Aurora Foundation's work with great interest. The Brennan Foundation. Even I knew that name. They were one of the largest philanthropic organizations in the country, worth over $2 billion. We're launching a new initiative focused on scaling successful education programs nationally, David continued. We've identified Aurora Foundation as a potential flagship partner. Would you be available to discuss a significant expansion grant? Significant turned out to be $8 million over 3 years, with the possibility of additional funding if we met performance benchmarks. It was more money than I'd dared to dream about. But more than that, it was validation from the philanthropic world that what I'd built was worthy of major investment. The catch, the Brennan Foundation wanted to make the announcement at their annual Impact Summit in 2 months. They were planning a major press conference, with national media attention, to launch their new initiative with Aurora Foundation as the featured partner. I said yes without hesitation. That night at dinner, I told Jonathan about the opportunity. $8 million? He nearly choked on his wine. Alina, that's incredible. Mom and Dad are going to be so impressed. Actually, I need to decline their merger offer. The Brennan Foundation specifically wants to partner with Aurora Foundation as an independent organization. They're interested in our nimble, grassroots approach. Jonathan's excitement faded. Wait, you're turning down my family's offer for this? I'm accepting a partnership that will allow Aurora Foundation to help thousands more students while maintaining our independence and mission focus. But Alina, think about this practically. My family has been incredibly gracious in offering to merge with your foundation. They don't need to do that. They could easily start their own education programs. This is them trying to include you, to make you a real partner in the family business. The family business is preserving their legacy and social connections. My business is changing lives. We didn't speak much after that. Jonathan couldn't understand why I'd choose professional independence over family unity. I couldn't explain that his family's version of inclusion still felt like suffocation. The morning of the Brennan Foundation announcement, I woke up to 17 missed calls from Victoria. When I called her back, her voice was ice. Alina, I assume you've seen the Times business section. I hadn't. I grabbed Jonathan's newspaper from outside our door and found the headline. Grassroots Education, Nonprofit Lands Major Grant. Aurora Foundation selected for national expansion. The article included quotes from David Chen about why they'd chosen Aurora Foundation, emphasizing our innovative approach to community-based programming and remarkable impact per dollar metrics. This is how I learn about your decision, Victoria continued. Through the newspaper, after we made you a generous offer to join our foundation. Victoria, I tried to handle this respectfully. Respectfully would have been calling us before speaking to the media. Respectfully would have been considering how this makes our family look. We offer to bring you into our foundation as a full partner, and you respond by announcing to the New York Times that you prefer working with strangers. I could hear the years of resentment in her voice, all the polite smiles and careful diplomacy finally cracking. This was never about rejecting your family, I said. This was about building something that could make a real difference. And our foundation doesn't make a real difference. Our decades of work, our millions in scholarships, our impact on countless lives, that doesn't matter because it wasn't your idea. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. You've been saying it since the day Jonathan brought you home. That we're not good enough for you, that our way of doing things is somehow inferior to yours. The accusation was so backwards it left me speechless. I was the one who wasn't good enough, remember? I was the one whose ideas were dismissed, whose background was questioned, whose contributions were minimized. Victoria, just don't. You've made your choice very clear. I hope your independence is worth what it's cost you. She hung up. An hour later, Jonathan came home early from work. His face was grim. We need to talk. He'd obviously spoken to his mother, probably his father and sister too. The family had rallied, as they always did when one of their own was threatened. Elena, I can't do this anymore. My heart stopped. Can't do what? This constant conflict between you and my family. This need you have to prove that you're better than them, more principled, more effective. I'm tired of being caught in the middle. Jonathan, that's not fair. I've never asked you to choose sides. I've just asked you to support my work. Your work that directly competes with my family's foundation. Your work that you've used to embarrass them in the press. Your work that's apparently more important to you than our marriage. How is building something meaningful embarrassing to your family? How is succeeding at something I'm passionate about more important than our marriage? I've never asked you to choose between me and your family. I've just asked you to see me as part of it. You are part of it, but being part of a family means compromise. It means considering how your actions affect everyone else. It means not making unilateral decisions that impact all of us. I stared at my husband, this man I'd loved enough to fight for, to change for, to diminish myself for, and realized he still didn't see what the real problem was. Jonathan, in 3 years of marriage, when has your family ever compromised for me? When have they considered how their actions affected me? When have they treated me like my input mattered? That's different, they're my family. I've known them my whole life, you have to earn your place. I have earned my place. I've earned it by building something from nothing, by helping hundreds of students, by securing millions in funding, by proving that I'm more than capable. But none of that matters to you or your family because it wasn't done their way. He was quiet for a long time, then, maybe we should take some time apart, let things cool down. Time apart? I think I should stay at the club for a while, give us both space to think about what we really want. What I really wanted was for my husband to fight for me, the way I'd fought to fit into his world. What I really wanted was for him to see his family's treatment of me clearly and defend me just once. What I got was him packing a suitcase while I stood in our bedroom doorway, watching 3 years of marriage dissolve because I dared to be successful on my own terms. Jonathan, I said as he headed for the door, when you're staying at the club, thinking about what you really want, ask yourself this. Have you ever once told your family that they needed to treat me better? Have you ever once fought for me the way I've fought to make this work? He paused, suitcase in hand. For a moment, I thought he might finally see it, finally understand what I'd been trying to tell him for years. Instead, he said, Elena, my family isn't perfect, but they're my family, and sometimes I feel like you'll never forgive them for not being good enough for you. After he left, I sat in our silent apartment and laughed until I cried. Not good enough for me. After 3 years of being told, subtly, politely, but unmistakably, that I wasn't good enough for them. The irony was perfect. The Brennan Foundation partnership transformed Aurora Foundation overnight. Within 6 months, we'd expanded to 3 new cities, hired 12 additional staff members, and launched 5 new programs. My little nonprofit that Victoria had called Elena's Hobby was now mentioned in the same sentences as established organizations that had been around for decades. I threw myself into the work with the intensity of someone who had nothing left to lose. Jonathan and I were separated but not yet divorced. He was still hoping his family would come around, and I would see reason. I'd moved into a smaller apartment in Brooklyn Heights, close enough to our Manhattan programs, but far enough from the Upper East Side to feel like I could breathe. The media attention from the Brennan partnership brought other opportunities. I was invited to speak at conferences, to serve on boards, to consult with other organizations looking to scale their impact. My calendar filled with meetings that actually mattered, conversations about real solutions rather than social obligations. But the most satisfying moment came 10 months after Jonathan moved out, when I got an unexpected call from Charles Harrington. Elena, I hope you don't mind me calling directly. I wanted to discuss a sensitive matter. I minded, but I was curious. Charles had never called me directly about anything. The Legacy Fund is facing some challenges, he continued. Our primary donor, the Whitfield Family Trust, has decided to redirect their giving to organizations with more measurable impact metrics. We're looking at a significant budget shortfall. I said nothing, waiting for him to get to the point. We were hoping you might have some advice about how to restructure our programs. Your work with Aurora Foundation has clearly resonated with impact-focused donors. The man who'd questioned whether I understood the complexities of their world was asking for my professional advice. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. Charles, I'm happy to recommend some consultants who specialize in nonprofit strategy. I can send you a list of firms that work with legacy organizations. Actually, we were hoping you might consider consulting with us directly, given your unique understanding of our situation. My unique understanding. Of course. I was the only person they knew who'd successfully built relationships with the kind of results-driven donors who were increasingly dominating the philanthropic landscape. I'm very busy with Aurora Foundation's expansion, I said, but I'll send you those referrals. After I hung up, I realized something had shifted. For 3 years, I desperately wanted the Harrington family's respect and acceptance. Now that circumstances had forced them to acknowledge my expertise, I felt nothing but professional courtesy. 2 months later, Margit called. Alina, I know things have been complicated between you and the family, but I wanted you to know that we've been following Aurora Foundation's success. What you've built is really impressive. Thank you. I was actually wondering if you might be willing to meet for coffee. I'm helping plan our annual gala, and we're struggling with attendance. The younger donor demographic seems less interested in traditional charity events. I thought maybe you'd have some insights about engaging that audience. Again, they were asking for my help, not as Jonathan's wife or a reluctant family member, but as a professional who'd proven she understood something they didn't. This time, I said yes to the coffee. Margit had chosen a quiet cafe in Midtown, neutral territory. She looked nervous, which was unusual for someone who'd always radiated confidence in our previous interactions. Alina, I owe you an apology, she said after we'd ordered. I've been thinking about some of the things that were said, some of the ways we handled your ideas and your contributions to the family. We could have been more inclusive. It was the first time any Harrington had ever acknowledged that they'd treated me poorly. I waited to see if there was more. The truth is, we were threatened by you, not by your background or your family, by your competence. You came in with all these ideas and energy, and you made us look stagnant, set in our ways. Instead of learning from you, we dismissed you. Why are you telling me this now? Margit sighed. Because we need your help, and I'm hoping that acknowledging our mistakes might make you willing to give it. But also because it's true, and it's been bothering me. She explained their situation. 3 major donors had shifted their giving to other organizations. Their gala attendance was down 40% from 5 years ago. Younger philanthropists were gravitating toward organizations with clear impact metrics and innovative approaches, exactly the kind of work Aurora Foundation was known for. We need to change how we operate, Margit said, but we don't know how. We've been doing things the same way for 30 years. What are you asking me? Would you consider serving as a strategic consultant for our gala and our donor engagement strategy? We'd pay your standard consulting rate, of course. This would be a professional engagement, not a family favor. I studied her face. She seemed genuinely contrite, genuinely concerned about their foundation's future. But I also knew the Harringtons well enough to suspect there was more to this request. Margit, what does Victoria think about you asking me this? She looked uncomfortable. Mom doesn't know I'm here. She thinks we should figure this out internally, maintain family control over all decisions. But Alina, we're losing relevance. If we don't change, we'll lose everything our grandfather built. So Margit was going behind her mother's back, just like I'd been doing for years when I tried to contribute meaningful ideas. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'll think about it, I said. That night, I called Maria for advice. What does your gut tell you? She asked. That they're desperate, that they finally realize I might actually know what I'm doing, but also that they're still thinking about this in terms of what I can do for them, not genuine partnership. So, what do you want to do? I thought about it for a long time. What did I want? Revenge? Vindication? To prove once and for all that I'd been right and they'd been wrong. Actually, what I wanted was simpler than that. I wanted to help people. If working with the Harrington Foundation could expand that impact, maybe it was worth setting aside personal satisfaction for professional purpose. I want to do good work, I said finally. If they're serious about change, if they're willing to actually implement recommendations instead of just asking for them, then maybe we can accomplish something meaningful together. And if they're not, then at least I'll have tried. Rate this story so far from 0 to 10. I want to see what you think. I agreed to consult on the Harrington Legacy Fund strategic restructuring, with clear boundaries and professional expectations. The contract I negotiated gave me decision-making authority over the programs I designed, with board approval required only for budget allocations over $100,000. Victoria was furious when she learned about Margot's outreach, but Charles overruled her. We need results, he told her bluntly. Elena gets results. The transformation took 6 months. I restructured their scholarship program to focus on first-generation college students rather than children of alumni. I created mentorship initiatives connecting Harrington Foundation beneficiaries with Aurora Foundation participants. I redesigned their gala to include impact showcases where scholarship recipients could share their stories directly with donors. The changes worked. Their next gala was sold out with a waiting list. Donor retention improved by 65%. They secured 2 new major partners who'd previously funded only innovative organizations. But the real victory came the night of their transformed gala. I was standing in the back of the ballroom, watching a young woman named Carmen tell the audience about how her Harrington scholarship had allowed her to become the first person in her family to attend college, when Victoria appeared beside me. Elena. Victoria. We stood in silence for a moment, listening to Carmen's story. She's remarkable, Victoria said finally. She is, and there are hundreds more like her, if we're willing to find them and support them. Victoria nodded slowly. I owe you an apology, several apologies actually. I turned to look at her, surprised by the genuine remorse in her voice. We treated you poorly from the beginning, she continued. We were so focused on protecting what we saw as ours that we couldn't see what you were trying to contribute. We made you feel unwelcome in your own husband's family, and that was inexcusable. It was the acknowledgement I'd wanted for years, but hearing it now felt different than I'd expected. Less triumphant, more sad for all the time we'd wasted. Thank you for saying that, I said simply. More than that, we were wrong about your capabilities. What you've built with Aurora Foundation, what you've done to revitalize our programs, you're extraordinarily talented. We should have recognized that and supported you from the start. Victoria paused, seeming to gather courage for what came next. Elena, I know you and Jonathan are separated. I know our family's behavior contributed to the problems in your marriage. If there's any way to repair this, the marriage, the family relationships, I want you to know that Charles and I are committed to doing better. I watched Carmen finish her speech to thunderous applause, watched the donors wiping tears from their eyes as they reached for their checkbooks. This was impact. This was what I'd been trying to create all along. Victoria, I appreciate that. I really do. But some things can't be fixed by apologies alone. What do you mean? Jonathan had 3 years to stand up for me, to see what you're seeing now, to support my work and my place in this family. He chose not to. That's not something I can unknow. She was quiet for a moment. He loves you. I know he does, but he loves his family's approval more, and I can't live my life competing with that. The divorce was finalized 2 months later. Jonathan kept the Upper East Side apartment and most of our joint assets, money that had come from his trust fund anyway. I kept Aurora Foundation and the consulting contract with his family's organization. At the divorce proceedings, he looked genuinely confused about how we'd gotten there. Alina, we could have had everything, he said as we left the courthouse. You could have been part of one of New York's most influential families. We could have made a real difference together. We are making a real difference, I said gently, just not together. 6 months later, I got the call that would change everything again. Ms. Martinez, this is Rebecca Walsh from the mayor's office. Mayor Johnson would like to discuss appointing you to head the city's new Education Opportunity Initiative. Would you be available to meet this week? The position would mean stepping back from day-to-day operations at Aurora Foundation, but it would also mean scaling everything I'd learned to impact the entire city's education system. It was a dream job I hadn't even known existed. The appointment came with a substantial salary increase, a staff of 40, and a budget that dwarfed anything I'd worked with before. It also came with significant media attention. Former social worker turned foundation leader tapped for major education role, read the Times headline. The article detailed my journey from $42,000 a year social worker to running a multi-million-dollar foundation to being selected for one of the city's most important education positions. It mentioned my divorce from Jonathan Harrington, but focused primarily on my professional accomplishments. I was quoted saying, "This role isn't about me. It's about the thousands of students in our city who deserve every opportunity to succeed, regardless of their background or their family's connections." The night the article ran, my phone buzzed with congratulations from colleagues, friends, and even some unexpected sources. Maria called, laughing with pride. David Chen from the Brennan Foundation sent champagne. Margaret texted, "So proud of you, you've earned this." But the message that surprised me most came from Victoria. "Alina, watching you succeed has been a privilege, even when we were too proud to admit it. Congratulations on this incredible opportunity. Jonathan doesn't know what he lost." A year into my new role, the Aurora Foundation Board approached me about expanding nationally. The Brennan Foundation was interested in funding replication of our model in 12 major cities. It would require raising $50 million over 3 years and building an organization of over 200 staff members. "We can't do this without you," Maria said at the board meeting where they formally offered me the role of National Executive Director. "You created this. You understand the mission better than anyone." It meant leaving my city position after only 2 years, but it also meant taking everything I'd learned about education, economic mobility, and systemic change, and scaling it beyond anything I'd imagined possible. I accepted. The national launch event was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. 500 guests, including foundation leaders, education officials, and political figures. As I walked to the podium to deliver the keynote address, I spotted familiar faces in the crowd. My parents sat in the third row, my mother wearing the dress we'd picked out together for this occasion, both of them beaming with pride. Maria and my original Aurora Foundation board were at table 12, looking like proud parents themselves. Margaret and Charles were at table 15. Victoria had RSVP'd but couldn't attend due to a prior commitment. And in the back of the room, almost hidden behind a column, was Jonathan. He looked older, tired in a way that expensive suits couldn't hide. When our eyes met across the crowded room, he nodded slightly, acknowledgement, maybe even respect. But I didn't feel anger or vindication or even sadness. I felt something I hadn't expected, gratitude. Not gratitude for how he and his family had treated me, but gratitude for the path their rejection had forced me to find. If they had welcomed me, supported my ideas, included me fully in their world from the beginning, I might have been content to remain a small part of their legacy instead of building my own. Their dismissal had hurt, but it had also freed me to discover what I was truly capable of accomplishing. I stepped up to the microphone, looking out at a room full of people who were there because they believed in the work we were doing, not because of social obligation or family connection. 5 years ago, I began, I was told that I didn't understand how things worked in certain circles, that I needed to learn the complexities of established institutions before I could contribute meaningfully to their work. A few chuckles from the audience, but mostly attentive silence. It turned out they were half right. I didn't understand how their institutions worked. but I did understand how to build something new. I understood how to create systems that put impact over tradition, results over reputation, and the needs of the people we serve above the comfort of the people we serve with. I spoke for 20 minutes about Aurora Foundation's growth, about the students we'd helped, about the model we were scaling nationally. But mostly, I spoke about the power of building something from nothing, of refusing to accept limitations other people try to place on your potential. The most dangerous thing anyone can ever tell you is that you're not good enough for their world, I concluded, because that might just inspire you to build a better one. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. As people filed out for the reception, making plans and exchanging business cards and discussing collaborations, I felt a sense of completion I'd never experienced before. This wasn't revenge, it wasn't even vindication. It was transformation, mine, and hopefully that of every student Aurora Foundation would serve in the years to come. Later that night, alone in my Brooklyn Heights apartment with a glass of wine and a stack of congratulations messages, I thought about the girl I'd been 5 years ago, the one who'd believed that love and good intentions were enough to overcome any obstacle, the one who'd tried so hard to fit into someone else's definition of success that she'd nearly lost sight of her own. I was grateful for her optimism, but I didn't miss her naivety. The woman I'd become understood that sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is their rejection. It forces you to stop asking for permission and start creating your own opportunities. My phone buzzed with one final message of the evening. Alina, I saw the coverage of tonight's event. What you've accomplished is extraordinary, and you deserve every bit of success that's coming your way. I was wrong about many things, but I was never wrong about your strength. Congratulations. Jonathan. I read it twice, then deleted it. Some chapters are worth remembering, others are simply worth learning from. 3 months later, Aurora Foundation opened our first satellite office in Chicago. 6 months after that, we launched programs in Los Angeles and Atlanta. By the end of our second year, we were operating in 15 cities and had helped over 3,000 students access higher education. The Harrington Legacy Fund remained one of our consulting clients. Victoria and I maintained a cordial professional relationship, and Margaret had become something approaching a friend. Charles sent a handwritten note every Christmas, updating me on their foundation's continued growth and thanking me for the role I'd played in their transformation. Jonathan remarried 2 years later, to a woman from a family very much like his own. I heard about it through mutual acquaintances and felt nothing but genuine hope that he'd found the kind of partnership that worked for him. As for me, I was too busy building the future to spend much time looking backward. The girl who'd been told she wasn't good enough had become the woman who decided what good enough meant. And that, it turned out, made all the difference. Rate this story 0-10 and let me know in the comments, what would you have done in Alina's position? Would you have taken Victoria's merger offer, or fought to maintain your independence like Alina did?